VitalEffects.com and Trigesterone Daily Natural Progesterone Cream proudly present Dr. Betty Kamen, leading author on women's hormone health.
Hormone replacement therapy, yes or no, how to make an informed decision. I wrote that book because the most frequently asked question I was getting from women as I lecture around the country pertained to hormone therapy. Women were asking me about the synthetic estrogens their doctors wanted them to take, even if they didn't have symptoms. Some women were saying they did have symptoms, they were taking the drugs, but they were worried about the side effects. Other women were telling me that they were taking the drugs and the drugs didn't sit well with them, so they stopped taking the drugs, but they were worried about the risks of not taking the drugs. So I thought I would write a balanced book. Half the book would be about the advantages and disadvantages of the alternatives. The other half would be about the same scenario with the synthetic drugs. However, if you want a balanced book, this isn't it. Because by the time I finished my research, I was convinced of several factors. Even the physicians do not realize how serious the side effects of the synthetic hormones are. And the second is that I discovered a very safe alternative. PMS, we know, stands for premenstrual syndrome, and it's amazing that the syndrome wasn't identified until the 1930s, and the expression PMS didn't become popularized until the 1950s. And so I began to wonder whether PMS was something that was new or had it been totally neglected. Well, I also learned that there are certain cultures in which the word for PMS doesn't even exist. I further learned that my grandmother, of course I'm a senior, so I'm going back a bit, my grandmother, even my mother, did not suffer from these problems. This is something fairly new, especially escalating in the latter part of this century, and the same is true of menopausal symptoms. The words for hot flash don't exist in other languages as well. It turns out that the reason for PMS is very similar to the reason that we have menopausal symptoms. What about osteoporosis? In the time span that the number of women in this country doubled, the incidence of osteoporosis tripled. So something's rotten here, and I was determined to find out what we can do to remedy all of this. I was invited to tour Canada, and I was in several major cities, and the sponsor of the program had rented theaters that held about 400 and some odd people each. And in each and every city, we were totally sold out. As a matter of fact, women were actually ticket scalping outside just before my lecture started. Now, can you imagine ticket scalping for a nutrition lecture? It's not so much that it was a nutrition seminar, but it was about a universal problem. You know, the prescription for synthetic estrogen is the most widely written prescription for women in both this country and in Canada. We know that in this country, a third of the women have had hysterectomies. We know that 1 in 4 women have fibroids. Obviously, the problem is widespread, and 90% of women will suffer to some degree, one way or another. Let's talk about what's happened to our food. Aside from the fact that foods are nutrient depleted for many reasons, because we've used artificial fertilizers in the soils, because food is picked not necessarily for ripeness but more for convenience, because food is grown for color and resistance to drought, resistance to disease, because food is stored, because we're no longer eating food in season, there is nutrient depletion. In addition to that, 90% of our feedlot animals get hormones implanted in their ears, and so these hormones wind up in our meat, in our milk, in our chickens, in our eggs, in our cheese, all over the place. We know that DDT was banned in 1978. However, it's going to be around for generations. As a matter of fact, tap water in the state of California was tested randomly, and in every single test for DDT was evident, even though, again, I repeat, banned in 1978. And so it's not only the food we eat, the water we drink. In addition to that, herbicides and pesticides that are used today exude what we call xenoestrogens, xeno spelled X-E-N-O, meaning foreign. These foreign estrogens wind up on our vegetables. No matter how pure, no matter how good a diet we think we're going to be on, we're eating vegetables, we're still getting these xenoestrogens. Unfortunately, we also get xenoestrogens from plastics. The plastic baggies that we might even put our vitamins into, the plastics that we sit on, that we wear, that we sleep on. These all exude xenoestrogens. Many articles have been written and published. In fact, articles in Lancet, the New Yorker magazine had an interesting article. Time magazine used this information as a feature story. So we're getting the information all over the place. There is no doubt that our environment is affecting our hormone balance. Now, what do women get when they're taking these synthetic estrogen? They're getting more estrogen. What we don't need, in most cases, is more estrogen. The doctors are very much influenced by the drug industry. I heard several physicians point to the fact that once they graduate from medical school, they get most of their medical education from the drug companies. And the drug companies will list in the PDR, the physician's desk reference, drugs that they know are available all over the country, drugs that they sell, drugs that they supply the doctor with in terms of free samples. The reps from the drug companies are very articulate. And what else does the doctor have to base the prescription on? The PDR. More than that, there's another side of this story that is absolutely unbelievable, but more and more people are realizing that this is happening. 10 years ago, I could pick up a medical journal and read an abstract and take at face value the conclusion of that abstract. I can't do that anymore. Now when I read an abstract that seems to go against the grain, something I know is not really so, I have to make half a dozen phone calls. I have to look at the end of the article and see where the study was done, who was credited for the article, and then I have to start phoning to find out, you know what I'm going to say, who sponsored the research. What interferes with life quality is weight gain. When a woman comes up to me at a meeting and says to me, no matter what I do, I can't lose weight. I exercise all day long, careful what I eat only vegetables, can't lose weight. My question is, are you on estrogen? The answer is yes. So weight gain is a serious side effect. Bloat is a serious side effect. Loss of libido. Hair growth where we don't want it. Hair loss where we would like to keep our hair. An effect on our blood sugar metabolism. An effect on our fat metabolism. Just name any metabolic process and this is going to have some reaction because the head bone is connected to the neck bone. Women who are on estrogen have more false readings when they take a mammogram than women who don't. In other words, they get false negatives and false positives in taking the mammogram if they are on estrogen therapy. Women having vaginal thinness from the progestin therapy that's added to the estrogen exposes them more to the HIV virus. The list goes on. And then, of course, these factors interfere with life quality, loss of libido, vaginal dryness, skin rashes, and so on. But what about loss of life itself? Increased endometrial cancer, increased ovarian cancer, and sad, increased breast cancer. This is a totally avoidable disease. The physicians think that they are protecting a woman's bones and protecting a woman's heart when they are prescribing estrogen. I have heard women tell me that their doctors said, well, if you want to live longer, you'd better get on the estrogen. I think they really believe this because they're influenced by the medical literature, and nothing could be further from the truth.
For more information, visit www.vitaleffects.com or call 877-263-1141.